This is episode 224 of Stand Up. Joining me today, Dr. Christina Greer, Dr. Jason Johnson, Professor Jeff Jarvis, and comedian Christian Finnegan. My name is Pete Dominic. It's time to stand up with me right now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. I've got four awesome guests that I talked with each for about 20 minutes. Such great insights and an analysis. Help us understand what has happened and take a look at what maybe needs to happen. But not a lot of speculation about what the result is going to be, because we didn't know when I spoke with all four of these guests on Wednesday, the day after the election, the 4th. And so I'm very excited to share all of those conversations with you today, because it's, I think, really important to get a lot of different looks and have thoughtful conversations about it. And I did that with these four excellent guests. So that is coming up. Also want to just thank everybody for joining me on election night. There was over 70, almost 80 people at the height. We were there from 6:30 p.m. to 2 a.m. And it was an awesome hang. And it was a lot of speculation and a lot of hand wringing and a lot of concerns and a lot of fears and a lot of anxiety. And I think for those of us who were there, we probably would have been doing that alone. And I think that we helped each other. We certainly made each other laugh quite a bit. And we got to know each other and commiserated. And while we didn't get the results and while we were very nervous about it, it was awesome to be together. And I would love to have you join us in the next hangout, which we'll do every week, as well as joining us on the Discord platform, where you're going to always join in the text conversation or go in voice and video there as well. Go to standupwithpetedominic.com, patreon.com/Pete Dominic, or just go to the paid subscription link in the show notes, because while the show is free, it is not cheap. I put a lot into it every single day. It posts every single day. And always up late working on it and getting tomorrow's show out for you so we can all learn together. That's what we're doing. So a couple of things I just wanted to say and play before we get to my guests today. First of all, we heard President Trump on the campaign trail, and for weeks, the past few weeks, over and over before the election, claiming that on November 4th, the day I'm taping, you won't hear about the coronavirus anymore. Did you hear him say that? You'll just wait. Just see. November 4th, it's just going to be gone. And he meant that we're not going to be talking about it or that it's going to be gone. It doesn't really matter which way he meant it. Today, the United States hit a single day record for the number of COVID cases, over 100,000. And 1,130 people were reported to have lost their lives. So for thousands of families in America, their main concern isn't the election results, but the fact that they've just lost another member in their family, or they themselves have contracted COVID, which is a life-altering experience even for those who recover from it, because the anxiety of it all and the way that you have to change your life and try not to pass it, and you may not be able to work. And obviously, it can be really horrible for people. And so I think I just wanted to mention that right here at the top of the show, that COVID is spreading and it is out of control. Second, I think I just want to say that while it looks like it's going to be a Joe Biden win as of 10 o'clock on Wednesday night, I think that when the final votes are in, we'll have a similar result to 2016, and that millions more Americans will have voted for the liberal, progressive Democrat, in this case, of course, Joe Biden, but back then it was Hillary Clinton. But I think a lot of people are making this observation, but I want to make sure I made a point about it, that the fact this election was even competitive after the last 4 years of horror and corruption and impeachment and death and destruction and daily despair and dishonesty, the fact that it was close at all will be a stain. It'll be a stain on our generation of voters and our country for our lifetimes. The fact that some 70 million people voted for Donald Trump after what we saw of 4 years of constant daily horror is the hardest thing for so many of us to deal with and to know, and to realize that many of these people are neighbors or friends or family members. Number 3, I hope that you got some rest, ate some healthy food, and got outside. Get outside. There's still warmth and, of course, sun and just being outside, even in the dead of winter. Get outside. It is a game changer. Okay, that's all I'll say about that. But I just want to remind you, go outside. Take a nice walk. Get out there. If you are outside, then send me a picture of where you're at because it makes me feel good. I know a lot of you listen to this podcast while walking your dog or going on a run or a walk. So send me a nice picture of nature. Those never get old to me. standupwithpete@gmail.com or tweet it to me or DM it to me. Or if you have my number, just text it to me. Just give me the picture of you in nature. Thanks. Now it's time for a segment I call Hot Tweets. Hot Tweets I saw, screen grabbed, and now I want to share with you. Hot Tweets, brought to you by the fine folks at My Pillow. My Pillow. If you like sleeping on a pillow that feels like it's filled with baseballs, My Pillow, where every third pillow is packed with a golden crucifix. Okay, here are some of the hot tweets about the election from Dan Pfeiffer. He tweeted, "It's worth remembering that the reason the vote count is taking so long is that in many of these states, the Republicans blocked laws that would have allowed the counting to start earlier." And in a related tweet, my friend Ellie Mistal at Ellie NYC, "If Republicans really want to know the results of the election on election day, they could always just abolish the Electoral College and go with the popular vote. We'd all know by 10 p.m. And speaking of the Electoral College, here's a great tweet from Julia Yaffe, who writes, "I would just like to point out that if a Republican ever won the popular vote but lost the White House in the Electoral College would be gone faster than you can say constitutional amendment." Also, if you were listening to the smart people, and I wasn't enough, and I'm always impatient and impulsive, but Ben Wickler in Wisconsin, real smart guy, he said this last night. "This is how tonight's going to go. In places that count absentee ballots separately from E-Day ballots, numbers will look terrible for Democrats until the absentee numbers roll in and the script flips. Red mirage will turn to blue shift." So a lot of people are mentioning that, and we just ignored it. And that's pretty much exactly what happened. Last night when Trump claimed the election in the middle of the night, Ben Shapiro, conservative stalwart, and massive piece of shit, in my opinion. Sorry, but he tweets, "No, Trump has not already won the election, and it's deeply irresponsible for him to say he has." So he reprimanded President Trump's middle of the night stupid autocratic speech, which I was very happy to not stay up for. Charles Pierce said, Esquire, "Win or lose, a lot more people voted for him this year after watching him as president for 4 years, then voted for him last time." I think that's the hardest realization for us to try to understand, those of us who struggle so much with the cult of personality that Trump has created. Hal Donahue, former military veteran, friend of mine, "A near majority of American voters and a majority of whites are too racist and frightened of change to be free, and they embrace fascism under a dear leader, real Donald Trump." Dr. Jason Johnson, "Y'all, America is a country driven in large part by anti-black white supremacy. Trump's improvement in the wake of economic disaster and failed COVID-19 management should forever end any suggestion that white votes are motivated by economic angst. #election night. And I'll talk to Jason in a moment here on the show. All right, there's just a few hot tweets, and now I want to play for you. No media was able to get this guy's name, but he was a chaplain in Detroit outside of that polling place where you had all those Trumpers chanting not to count the votes, which was a very weird thing to be chanting for. Anyway, I thought this was a really great soundbite from this chaplain, this black chaplain outside of that polling place in Detroit, and I wanted to share this with you.
We are in the process of wanting to get all the votes counted. The road to victory of any side is going to come through Michigan and through Detroit. And to stop the vote suggests to stop the very democracy that we are running and these persons are running to elect to uphold. And so we want every vote to count because our vote is our voice, and it will be counted. And the election process will be done. Things are secure on the inside, but of course we have intimidating efforts on the outside, but we're not deterred. As goes Detroit, will go Michigan. And Michigan will join the force of others to be able to say that we have voted. We have record turnout voting. And again, if you want to represent Michigan and Detroit, you ought to want every vote counted.
And who do you think these people are?
Well, these are persons who are passionate and they're consistent. They've been saying all along they're going to suggest that it's rigged. They've been saying all along it's going to suggest that it's flawed or fake. but they've been saying that before now. We just need to be persistent to make sure our voice gets counted, because as goes Detroit will be done so. And I will say the black vote in Detroit is higher than it's ever been, and we will determine the outcome because we've gone from picking cotton to picking presidents.
Oh, mic drop. I thought that was a great moment I wanted to share with you. A not great moment, but that I still wanted to share with you was this insane guy. I watched this about 30 times, by the way, in Nevada, where there was a little press conference with Clark County Registrar of Voters Joe Gloria. He was telling reporters that the Nevada County was not prepared to give an update. They were not prepared to give an update on election numbers. And this guy comes running up, and he looks like out of shape Hulk Hogan or a guy from Joe Exotic. He looked like a fat Joe Exotic, and he had a T-shirt on, and on it said barbecue, BBQ, beer, freedom, BBQ, beer, freedom. And it's amazing. It's jarring to play the audio. But he just ran up behind the guy who was at the microphone and just started yelling that the Biden crime family is stealing the election. You got to hear it with me. All right, here we go.
As I mentioned, we are not prepared to give that number.
The Biden crime family stealing the election. The media is covering up. The Biden crime family stealing this election. The media is covering it up. The Biden crime family stealing this election. The media is covering up. We want our freedom for the world. Give us our freedom, Joe Biden. Joe Biden is covering up this election. He's stealing it.
Oh, my God. And then he just walks away.
Where were we? What was the last question?
And like a miracle, he'll just be gone one day. Oh, it's crazy. We want our freedom from the world. I don't even mean nobody got to catch up with that guy and do a deep dive interview and find out what makes him tick. That guy is like the Avatar. He is the actual American I think of when I think of Trump supporters. Guys like that. What is he afraid of? What are his fears about a Joe Biden presidency? I really want to try to understand that better. There's a lot of good news stories that came out of the elections across the country yesterday, including 5 states that legalized marijuana. That's right, 5 states now legalized marijuana for both recreational and medical use. The majority of New Jersey and Arizona residents voted yes on a ballot measures to make recreational marijuana legal. Voters in South Dakota approved marijuana for medical use, and lawmakers in New Jersey will now have to draft and pass legislation for implementing the new policy. Yay! That's right on the border. And Mississippi voters approved an initiative to establish a medical marijuana program for patients with debilitating conditions. Voters in Montana voted for 2 initiatives to legalize, regulate, and tax recreational marijuana for adults 21 and older. And 11 other states in the District of Columbia have already allowed legal recreational marijuana, of course, prior to Election Day. And speaking of drugs, the state of Oregon has become the first U.S. state to decriminalize possession of all drugs, including cocaine, heroin, and meth for personal use, according to the Associated Press and the Oregonian. And I think that's a really big story as well. So big that when I tweeted it out, Dane Cook liked it. Comedian Dane Cook's got like 2 million followers. Haven't talked to him in years, so just thought that was hilarious. And some other really good news, I think, worth mentioning before I get to the guests on today's show. A lot of historic wins in 2020. Cori Bush became the first black congresswoman in Missouri. I thought that was pretty great after defeating longtime incumbent Congressman William Lacey Clay earlier this year. She's a registered nurse, a Black Lives Matter activist, and I think that's a really significant win. Sarah McBride became the first trans senator in U.S. history. She won the Delaware state Senate race and became the first transgender state senator in United States history, a Democrat. Richie Torres and Mondaire Jones became the first openly LGBTQ black members of Congress. Of course, Mondaire Jones was on this show, and he is my representative now. Very excited about that. Mondaire, congratulations. Very cool. I love that guy. Stephanie Byers became Kansas' first trans legislator. Jabari Prisport became the first LGBTQ person of color elected to New York State legislature. Kim Jackson became Georgia's first openly LGBTQ state senator. And a lot more wins that I'm not mentioning. Obviously, some really tough losses. My friend Pam Keith, Cam Mangone, Rob Anderson, all of who I was trying to help and joined me here on the show. That was really brutal. Watching the win for Susan Collins in Maine in the Maine Senate was really hard. John Ossoff losing in Georgia was a really tough loss as well. I mean, that one might actually go to a runoff, so I'll wait and see on that, but that would be tough. I mean, you can't overstate how big losing the Senate was. So where are we at now? That is a part of the question that I asked all four of my guests joining me today. Dr. Jason Johnson is a professor at the School of Global Journalism and Communications at Morgan State University. You see him on MSNBC a lot. He's a contributor at the Greer, SiriusXM, of course, and regularly here on this show. He's on Twitter at Dr. Jason Johnson, and he's taping a podcast, a short series with Dr. Christina Greer, who's also joining me later on, coming up for the Greer. So you definitely should check them out together on a podcast. I've got him here separately today. I caught up with Jason as he was on his way driving to the comic book store for a short reprieve. What in the middle of all the chaos?
Mr. Dominic.
You.
How are you?
Did you sleep last night?
Not really. Not really.
All right, well, I want you to get some rest. How much time do you have to talk? I appreciate you talking today.
You know what? You have a special amount of time with me today, Mr. Dominic, because you have as long as it takes me to get to the comic book shop. So I'm driving to the comic book shop for my one bit of self-care during this crap show of an election season we're in. So we can talk all the way up until I get this month's Spider-Man.
Well, I hope that brings you the solace or distraction that you're so deservedly
that I've earned.
That you've earned. Thank you.
After 12 hours of this stuff.
This is the first time I've really talked this morning. I can't even put a thought together. So can you take me through your last night? I'm kind of interested in where you were because I've seen the clips on MSNBC and your Twitter commentary, and I think that you've been, as usual, a bright light of fearlessness and honesty and a lot of original thought. So where were you? How did you spend the night?
So I'm glad because I actually want to share this. This is something I'm glad that you asked because I was trying to figure out how to write about this at some point.
Oh, cool. So
this is the first presidential election because of COVID, right, that I was at home. You know, in 2008, I was doing stuff with the local Cleveland station. And then I got driven to D.C. to do analysis. In 2012, I was actually in Doha, Qatar. And I did the nighttime coverage for Al Jazeera. In 2016, I was with Fusion down in Miami. And usually when you're going through nightly election coverage, you're able to be in a certain mode because you're in studio, you're in the hotel, you know it's going to be a long day, you're walking around talking to the community. There's something particularly anxiety inducing and frustrating about having to do an election night while doing hits in your home. It just doesn't feel right. It's very because in 2016, which was just bonkers, right? We were when things started looking bad, when Pennsylvania flipped to Trump, it was all right, let's go downstairs. We were in Miami and a couple of us, we went out, we grabbed dinner, we grabbed drinks, even if it was 2 or 3 in the morning. But for this, it's where am I going to go? Oh, my couch.
Right. So you're saying it was a lot more stressful and anxiety being home and chiming in all these different places that you were talking to.
Right, because there's no break from it.
Yeah.
You're and I tried to sleep most of the day and get rest because I knew it was going to be a late night. But you just you're all wired up, you're all concerned, you're all anxious. And look, quite frankly, there were a couple of surprises last night. But if this plays out the way it's looking right now, this is pretty much 88% of what people thought was going to happen. Although I have some questions, but the idea that Joe Biden would retake those blue states that Trump flipped by a small margin, and all he would need is to flip one other state, and he very likely win the Electoral College. That appears to be where we're headed now, and that's what most people have been saying for a couple of months. I think the part that really messes with people is that the shit was not supposed to be this close, and how the hell did these Senate and House races go so bad? And that's what we're really going to be poring over over the next couple of days or weeks, because I think most people's analysis right now is way the fuck off, just to be candid. And they're missing some of the real points about what happened yesterday and today, for that matter.
Yeah, I think that's all. I mean, you predicted, and you had been saying, and nobody wanted to hear this, and including me, I mean, typically me, that it was going to go well into the next day. And I mean, or in later this week. That's one thing that's not at all surprising. And what do you think is wrong with all of us who are being so impatient and upset about how long it's taking?
Well, it's funny. It's like somebody tells you about a really great restaurant downtown when we used to be able to go to restaurants pre-pandemic. And if they're like, oh, hey, Pete, this is a really great Italian place and it's downtown, you totally got to go, but there's a long ass line. You're like, okay, cool. No, for real. There's a long line, but they make the best, cannoli, blah, blah, blah. And then you hear this for weeks, and then you go to the restaurant, and when you see the line, you're like, oh, I can't believe this damn line. It's like, dude, we've been telling you. So everybody who was smart had been saying, we will not know the result that night. And we didn't. It took a day and a half because we probably won't know for sure until maybe Thursday or Friday in some of these instances. And then you're going to have, the potential legal challenges. Although at this point, I think Trump might have missed his window for stopping the counts. At this point, I think his next option is going to be trying to flip some electors or get some faithless electors, because if you're trying to stop the count, you kind of needed to do that already. I mean, really, it's like they're already counting, dude. Like, you can't really, most courts are not going to step in where it's like, oh, well, they only reported same day voting. They're doing absentee. So, yeah, I think he might have missed that window. I
think it's funny just the way you said that. It's almost like you were advising him, like, Mr. President, I mean, if you're going to end this shit, you got to do it right now. You're going to miss your window. Well, you wrote and you just shared this piece, which I think is, I haven't heard anybody else talking about this, but you wrote this piece a while back for the Greer that the most important swing voter of 2020 is not who you think it is. And you reference the importance of the Medicaid expansion and basically giving a lot of thanks to the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, for some of the outcome turnout last night. Where and elaborate, if you don't mind, if you're not at the comic book store yet.
Oh, no, I'm not there yet. I'm not, because I would have just hung up. No, so I'm taking the long way just for you, Pete. I'm taking the long way. And by the way, dude, you didn't tell me that, like, last week was your birthday. So happy birthday. I should. I don't know how you didn't. Week, right? I
sent you singing telegram. It was supposed to come to your place to let you know. Oh, well, that's
because I thought it was Jehovah's Witness or a canvasser.
No,
and I just shut my door.
It was just a guy singing in a revolutionary outfit about my birthday, just to let you know. I don't know why you wouldn't answer the door to a musket carrying Confederate looking fellow just to tell you it's my birthday. But thank you, 45.
Yes, exactly. Wow, you are older than me. I knew it.
Yeah.
I didn't, because I saw you and watch it, and I was like, hey, why didn't Pete tell me it was his birthday? Look, I don't trust people who come to my door. I just, I drove by the crazy Trump caravan and cars, so I'm extra suspicious.
Well, more importantly, if you want to talk about me, it's a year that I've been doing the podcast, and you've been a really important part of the podcast, and so many of my listeners are such huge fans of yours. So thank you. But let me get to back to that Medicaid question.
Yeah. So basically, I did some research, and there was a couple of sort of organizations that follow Medicaid expansion. And the gist of it is this: Obamacare was passed in 2010, and there was massive resistance to it because the black guy came up with the idea. Because every poll at the time showed that the pieces of Obamacare most people liked. They like the idea that an insurance company can't upcharge you for a pre-existing condition, especially since some of those conditions are things like, having a child. They like the fact that you could keep kids on your insurance until they were 25. And they like the idea of Medicaid expansion, because Medicaid expansion really ends up helping not just working class people, but like salaried people and people who have insurance from their jobs, but still gaps, right? So I give this example of, like, let's say you're a contractor who does like payroll accounting for businesses in your county. That's a real job and a real career, but like you may be paying for your own insurance, and Medicaid expansion, can fill those gaps in, can fill those gaps in for prescription drugs and everything. So the point is, all these white folks in particular hated Obamacare and hated Medicaid expansion. And there were lots of studies that showed that this was, of course, racially driven until Trump got into office. And then suddenly people are like, oh, wait, you're about to snatch my medical care.
Right.
And that's how you got all those people voting and putting the Democrats into power in 2018. And I think that may have been the slight saving grace for Joe Biden in these Midwestern states, because some of the states with the largest Medicaid expansion numbers are your Rust Belt Midwestern states. And I show in the article, like literally the number of people on Medicaid expansion in Michigan, if you just took everybody who's benefiting from Medicaid expansion in Michigan, that is larger than the margin that Trump won Michigan by in 2016 and larger than the margin that Biden's probably going to win Michigan by in 2020.
It matters. It's a really important point, and we talk about how nobody cares about policy, but that's a really important point where policy, I think, matters a great deal. Are you there yet? Because I got to ask you about Latinos.
No, I am not there. I'm driving by College Park now, so you still got a couple minutes with me.
All right, so you've also made a lot of points. You had this great article at the Greer last week about a certain strain of black man and patriarchy and celebrity and success as it relates to maybe liking Trump. Very specific and nuanced, and you have similar ideas about the Latino voter. But I do also want to ask you, a lot of people are reacting to right now demographics, who voted for who where. And I'm conflicted because that's all based on exit polling, is my understanding. We don't actually know the way blacks, women, white suburban women, Latinos, World War II era veterans who watch Fox News voted. We don't actually have that information yet. Am I right about that as we speak at just before noon on Wednesday?
We really don't know. And here's the reason why, Pete. And I tweeted about this, and I'm going to look at how the New York Times did their exit polls, because there was an Emerson one that everybody kept pointing to. It's like, oh, Trump got 19% of the black vote or whatever. It's like, look, exit polls are, you do polls with people as they're walking out of a polling place, which means you're talking to same day voters, which means in a pandemic where millions of people voted early, voted by mail, or voted absentee, your exit polling is going to be really, really off. It's just not indicative, because the people who voted same day were skewing Trump. So, so a lot of this exit poll stuff, I'm like, no, we cannot look at exit polls the same way in 2020 as usual. I know so many people that voted early, right? They voted early for their health. They voted early for convenience. They voted early as a political statement. So you can't really trust these exit polls. And I'm not the guy who says that you can't trust polling, but in this particular instance, you can't. Now, how does that get the Latino voters? It's the same thing with black folk. And Pete, I appreciate you for asking me this question. Here we are at a year anniversary. You talked to me. You talked to Dr. Greer. You talked to Ellie. I think you've had Eddie Glutt. Like, here's the thing. Nobody really got what the hell was going on in the 2020 primary until black people and black anchors and black reporters and black analysts were able to get on TV and be like, y'all, look, this race is not over until we get to South Carolina. You got to talk to some black people,
right?
And you got to have people who actually know the African American community, because I promise you, some 73-year-old black woman who is the local political power broker in South Carolina, she gonna tell me things that she's not gonna tell some of my white colleagues. Period.
Yeah. Yes.
So the same thing applies to Latino voters. You've got Paula Ramos, who's brilliant, who works at Vice. You've got Alicia Menendez, one of my dearest friends who I went to grad school with, Dr. Vicky DeFrancesco Soto at UT Austin. People need to talk to more Latino and Latinx analysts, because if they did, they would have known that what you had happen. Armand, who's the pollster down in Florida, they will tell you that Mexican Americans in Arizona and white Cubans in Miami ain't the same thing as Latinos in Texas whose families may have been there since the Alamo. A lot of Latinos identify as white folks.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it was you who mentioned there is a difference between light-skinned Cubans and dark-skinned Cubans.
Yes. Look,
And,
look, Ted Cruz, okay, Ted Cruz is Cuban. Okay, but Ted Cruz thinks of himself like a white guy. There's a difference between Ted Cruz and Julian Castro. There's a difference between Ted Cruz, Julian Castro, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who, quiet as kept, used to go by the name Alex until she decided to run for office. Ding, ding, ding. Let's be clear about, how these sorts of ethnicities can also be fluid and make a difference in how people present themselves. And I really think that is why campaigns fail. Now, I also think when people say, oh, well, Trump did well because he just appeals to machismo and Latinos. Well, yeah, but Trump lost Arizona. It's not that simple. It's not just Hispanics or Hispanic men are macho. You've got to talk about the particular issues that affect those communities. And unlike African Americans, where if you are an African American, it means somewhere along the lines, somebody in your family was probably enslaved. You share that history. That's not the same thing as somebody who, again, your family has been in Texas since the Alamo, or your family are refugees from Guatemala, or, you're a Mexican American whose father came over to go to school and married your mom in Phoenix, and you've just been here ever since. Like, these are all very different identities, and it's about damn time that the press start paying attention to them. Otherwise, people will keep making the same damn mistakes.
Is there anything for me personally to feel good about based on the category, the vessel that I travel in, which is white, straight, male? Anything?
Not a thing. Not a thing.
Is there something I'm missing?
Pete.
Is there
Didn't
something?
you know that it's all your fault?
Well, I want you to know. I mean, I saw the outcome of the Rockland County results for the presidential vote. I live in Rockland County, New York, and this was not easy for me to do, but I did call in a fire mission on my own location. Drop all of the ordnance on me. I repeat, expend all of the ordnance on my location. God bless you, everybody. I hope you survive. Let me just ask you lastly.
Let me tell you something. I am,
in reverse, going in reverse.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. There's a part of me also, and I don't think this can be sort of overlooked, where it's like, I always think it's unfair in these campaign situations where the focus is always on black and brown people. It ain't our fault. This is on white folks. This is completely on white people. That a large number of white people, and you saw my clip, but it's true. I was wrong in this assessment. I was wrong on some levels because I was like, wow, Trump has mismanaged the economy and mismanaged COVID so badly that he has pissed off enough white people. Now, he clearly has pissed off enough white people that it looks like Joe Biden might be able to pull off, a couple of states and maybe end up winning the Electoral College.
Enough, but not enough. Enough to win, but not nearly as many as you would have hoped or thought. Maybe is it
not nearly as many as I would have thought. I still think that there was very clearly. I don't buy that there wasn't any election hacking. I don't buy that there wasn't any vote hacking this time. I just don't believe it. Some of these numbers are so off and so skewed, and they make no sense.
You have no evidence for it yet.
I wouldn't be surprised if there was some level of intervention or hacking that went on. But I'll also say this: it's like these numbers that Joe Biden has and the victory that he's going to have is probably because of the number of, white Republicans who are like, all right, I think Joe Biden's doing it. I think Trump's doing a shit job. And then two, Medicaid expansion people who are like, I just can't run the risk of losing my health care after I've already lost my job during a pandemic.
Those are white people, the Medicaid expansion.
Yes.
Okay, last question. Are you following this narrative about the post office slowing or not finding these votes in Georgia, or any other narrative that seems really suspicious in terms of suppression?
Well, it's not just suspicious, but it's a fact. Like, this is the thing. You can't, I just keep telling people, you cannot ignore Joe Biden ran the best darn campaign you can imagine, given that he's in a pandemic, there's foreign interference, there's massive disinformation, and you have a president who's dedicated to cheating. And all the while, when Trump was messing with and having DeJoy, the Postmaster General, shut down processing centers and shut down vote counting centers, that is exactly what's happening. So you have 300,000 ballots that we know are sitting in post offices. This isn't theoretical. This isn't speculation. The judge is like, look, I know these are there. They're right behind your back. We keep seeing hidden video from post office workers of these sitting on the top of magazines and coupons and Holiday Inn inserts and everything else like that. You're supposed to have these available by election day at 3. And DeJoy basically said, deuces, I'm not going to do it. So now at 12, we're supposed to have this other hearing. Right. And here's the thing. We don't know where the distribution is going to be, Pete, but 300,000 votes that are in North Carolina, Florida, Georgia, and Arizona, isn't that suspicious? Isn't it interesting that these key swing states are the main areas where all of these votes were suddenly just not being processed? That's intentional.
Oh, I thought it was only in Georgia. I didn't realize that.
Oh, no. No, there's a chart that I found that actually goes, because here's the thing about absentee ballots, right? States know how many mail-in ballots they sent out. And in a lot of states, you can note when you sent your absentee ballot in. So if I know in Wayne County, Michigan, that we sent out 200,000 mail-in ballots and we've only gotten back 187,000, but we've had people calling and registering and highlighting, hey, look, I already sent this in, then you've got 23,000 ballots sitting in a mailbox somewhere.
All right, so we'll follow up on that. Now, I know that you are at the comic book store, and you have given so much of yourself and of your time to not only to me just now and to so many others on social media. You and Christina Greer posting a podcast, which I listen to and will plug and share, and of course MSNBC and everywhere else. So I want you to put the phone away, and you said you're at the comic book store. You want you to switch right into the Spider-Verse and just escape for as long as you need to so you can come back to us.
Dude, I'm going to zone out. And by the way, my mother says happy birthday. My mom says happy birthday.
Well, I'd love to get the band back together.
I will tell her that. I was telling her earlier because, of course, my mom calls me all the time, like, what's going to happen? Blah, 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 blah. And I say, hey, it's like, I'm going to be going to a Pete's show, blah, blah, it's his birthday. She's like, well, tell him I say happy birthday. So my mother says happy birthday.
It was one of the best episodes of the year. If you could get us back together, I'd love to hear her on all of that's happening.
I will ask her when I talk to her later on this afternoon and give her the update, because regardless of how many people I have to speak to about elections for work, I am required by genetic law to answer all of my mother's questions.
Well, I just want to tape that. I'll sit back and just tape her at your conversation. That'd be real. Thank you.
Yeah, that actually would be kind of fun.
That would be real. You just let me know. I'll just sit back and press record as long as she knows it's happening, and tell her not to pull the punches, although I'm not sure she can.
Yeah, she pretty much talks the same way. It doesn't matter if it's recorded. I've been dealing with it for years.
I love you, buddy, and I've been really enjoying your all your insights. Thank you for joining me, as always.
All right, later.
All right, man. Thank you. There goes Dr. Jason Johnson. Follow him on Twitter. Let him know you heard him here. And I just think he's got some of the best insights, some of the most courageous insights, fearless, with his opinions. He says a lot of controversial stuff, and he has a lot to back it up. And I just love talking to him. Always great. Glad he got some comic books. All right, now I want to talk a little bit about journalism and more about the election with Jeff Jarvis, who I could talk to about just about anything. You should read him at buzzmachine.com, which is where a couple of his pieces that I referenced today are. You can follow him on Twitter at Jeff Jarvis. Jeff, of course, is an author, a speaker. He is the Leonard Toe Professor of Journalism, Innovation, and Director at the Toe Knight Center for Entrepreneurial Journalism at the City University of New York's Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism. And he is one of Howard Stern's favorite TV critics. He was one of the founding editors and creators of Entertainment Weekly. And I just love talking to him. So always check out everything that he's writing, tweeting, and of course, joining with me to discuss right now, the great Jeff Jarvis. All right, there he is. I got him between meetings. The great Jeff Jarvis. Thank you for joining me.
The great Pete Dominic, thank you for having me.
It is Wednesday around between 1 and 2 p.m. We still don't know the final result of the election, and I'm not sure that we should really speculate about when they are going to come, but let's just look back on what we saw last night and what you think of it as a guy who's just written a really interesting, important piece titled Last Stand of the Old Angry White Man. Maybe we start there with last night's results.
And I say that as one myself, but not as angry as the others. I think what we're seeing here is a group of people, the old white men who are in power, knowing they're going to lose power and choosing to burn the fields behind them rather than share that with who will follow. And the young, angry white men fear that they're not going to have jobs in an age of robotics and technology, and they're not properly educated for that because it's, after all, the uneducated white man who is the base of Trump's base. And so they tend to perform, I think, more than believe.
You don't think they're blaming robots like those uneducated black white men? I think they're often blaming other people and policies that aren't accurate, from immigrants to the black guy at the job that got, a promotion over them, to trade deals where there's some grain of truth to different things, but it's mostly robots.
No, what I'm saying is technology puts them in a position where they know they're not qualified, but they don't blame themselves for that, for not being properly educated. They have to find someone else to blame, and they blame the other. They don't blame the robot. They blame the immigrant. They blame the black person. They blame the one whom they don't know and fear.
So what do you think last night's results says about the last stand of the old angry white man? I mean, he seems to be standing pretty strong, and so does the angry or scared white woman.
They have managed to destroy or challenge every institution there is. The presidency, the Senate, the courts, peaceful transfer of power, media, elections, U.S. Postal Service, census, all of these things, justice. And so I fear for that. I worry that we're in a country where half the country could vote for that, could choose that. And not only choose that, but also choose a lack of safety for themselves and their families, and a lack of an economic future for themselves. The lack of self-interest is amazing. And I recently, because I'm a fun kind of guy, I reread parts of Hannah Arendt's The Origins of Totalitarianism.
Yes. I've never read that book, but I've never heard a more referenced book in Trump's tenure.
It's pretty amazing. And of course, the parallels are here. And no, I'm not necessarily saying that Trump is Hitler or Stalin, but I am saying that the lessons of totalitarianism are clear. And part of what she says that I found so fascinating about her study of Germany and the Soviet Union was the mindset of the person who becomes part of the movement, right? And she says that this person has a radical loss of self-interest.
Right.
Well, voting for the person who is going to help you lose your job and it is not going to keep you safe is self-interest. Next, she says that they have a cynical or bored indifference in the face of death. Now, that may mean going to war. It may mean burning masks and going to super spreader events. They have a passionate inclination toward the most abstract notions. This one really hit me, Pete, because surely the thing that matters most in their lives, like you and me, is the health of us and our families, the safety of us and our families, our economic future, and having a job. But instead, what they talk about is the Second Amendment and guns and abortion and these abstract concepts that don't hit their daily lives. And fourth, she said that they have a general contempt for common sense. Well, see QAnon.
Yeah. That's all good stuff, especially the issue about, if your main concern is your health, then you should be concerned about your health care insurance and losing what gains we've made with the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid Expansion, which my friend Dr. Jason Johnson played a huge role in winning the votes that it did vote, that they did win in a number of states. But you're going to maybe lose your health care, and you're also maybe going to get sick directly because of this president and Republicans in Congress. But they
So let me ask you a question.
That.
Oh, wise one. I was thinking about this this morning. Joe Scarborough, who's still a Republican in his soul, was playing the meme that the problem was what was successful about Trump was scaring people with the word socialism. And I thought about it, and I thought, how is it that socialism, liberalism are still bad words in this society? So we don't use it. We call it progressive. Mm-hmm. But conservative, after all we've gone through in the last 4 years, is not a bad word. How is that?
I think it's getting to your other really important piece, it's the media's treatment of those words, usage of those words, defining of those words. And no one does it better than right-wing media, from Ben Shapiro to Mark Levin to Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson. They make everything a binary. This is bad and this is good. Conservatism is good. And obviously socialism is bad. And I think that's what people hear, and that's what gets them through their day, and that's what they cling to. When in fact, if you explain policies to people and then ask them polling questions and you don't put a label on it, whether it be gun control or healthcare, overwhelmingly folks agree with the more progressive take on things. But that's not how people hear it. They aren't explained policies. They just hear words. Yeah.
And I wouldn't, as much as I'm critical of Fox and talk radio, I would also put blame on my colleagues in liberal media. I think that we have failed the country. We're the institution created to keep us from having authoritarians and tyrants, and we failed. We're the ones who are supposed to enhance justice and equality, and we failed. We're the ones who are supposed to hold people to account, and we failed. So I wonder what a journalism looks like that changes that. And the first thing that struck me is that, and this, when I wrote this post before the election, I maybe was hoping that Biden would win, though I'm very superstitious and I make everybody knock wood if they even say those words. And it's a great post.
Unbelievable. Reconstructing journalism to address alienation versus facts at Medium. I've linked to it in today's show notes. Go ahead at Jeff Jarvis.
Thank you, sir. So the first thing is to pay less attention to the Trumpists. They are minority. It is possible that Joe Biden already has earned more votes than anyone in history. He may well have a larger margin than Obama had. In any democratic society without a racist structure of an electoral college, he's the clear winner. Right. And we pay attention to the minority that supported Trump, not the majority that opposes him. And so there's all these communities, African Americans, Latino Americans of various stripes. They are not a monolith, don't we know? LGBTQ Americans, disabled Americans, immigrant Americans, and so on, where we've got to show what their circumstances of life are. Now, then I think we can also pay attention to the Trumpists. But then I think our job is to look at their real concerns in life, not the abstract things that are used for propaganda at the high level to enrage the crowd, but the things they care about every day. Because what we're going to find, damn it, is that there is a commonality of interest there. That we will care about trying to get health insurance that we can afford. We will try to care about protecting our families. If we understand that, but media don't present that. Media present the public debate as if it is all high-level concepts that we like to have culture wars and cancel culture fights over.
When you make the point that we need to tell the stories of lives ruined and loneliness and allegiance to false messiahs, tell the stories of Trump's lies and exploitation, not from his perspective or from the journalists. We fact-checked him, but from that of his victims, you write, not to shame them, but to understand them even when they share the blame. What does that look like? What is that third principle in your piece? How, is it a video?
I'll start with what it doesn't look like. The New York Times about a year ago did a story like, hey, let's go meet a Nazi, right? And it came out, he wears khakis just like we do, and he eats at Panera just like we do, and it normalized him.
Right.
That's not what we want to do. The New York Times also had a story about 2 weeks ago about people who deny vaccines. And this fits with your view of you're a much better listener than I am. You will tolerantly listen to someone to understand their circumstances, to understand their worldview, so you can find those ways that you can get into it. I think that's what we need to do. So I think we need to follow the Pete Dominick school of good listening.
It's increasingly frustrating when people are not agreeing on kind of a baseline truth about a thing. That's where I continued. I began to lose my patience with people when they are espousing crazy theories, such as so many people have. I mean, one of the most pervasive theories out there, and it's interesting that it even caught any fire, is that Joe Biden is a pedophile. I mean, you just met just before we started recording my 13-year-old daughter who was texting with a boy in her class who said that. He's a 13-year-old boy, and he's saying Joe Biden's a pedophile. This is a horrible accusation. You know, what's worse accusation than call somebody a racist? A pedophile, that they're actively harming children. It caught on, Jeff.
But I don't know that the 13-year-old boy, I can't speak for that. But I think in general, I came to realize recently that they don't really believe this.
Well, my daughter's friend is a 13-year-old boy who says Joe Biden himself touched him. No, but That's how far he went to bring
his parents
point.
Are probably putting that in his head. No, the problem here is that they want us to believe that they believe it. It's right. Performative. It's
I don't know if I agree. Why do you? I don't know if I agree with that. Why do you? What you wrote that, and I actually think that's an interesting idea, but I don't know. I talk to these people directly. They sound like they believe it. They research it.
Is not to believe it. They're not. We are trying to traffic in facts and rationality. Mm-hmm. They are trafficking in emotions. And if it could be true, that's good enough.
Right, as well said. Yeah.
Dana Boyd, who's a wonderful researcher at Data Society in New York, says that we are in an epistemological war. And if I hate you, I'm going to hate your facts. And you think you have experts and you have doctors? Well, they're an elite just like you, so I can't stand them and what they say either. Fire Fauci becomes the end of that string, right? It makes no sense. And we're trying to look at that on a sensical scale. They're looking at it on an emotional scale, performative. They're saying, I'm angry at you people. I'm angry at my own circumstances. Maybe they're not even angry at us. Maybe they're just angry because they see their future is not very bright, but they're angry. Now, do they have a right to be angry? No, I don't think so, because what they did was they squandered their white privilege. They had the privilege to do a lot of things, and they could have. And now they're angry that they see a worse life ahead of them and for their children. Now, I understand that fear. I understand that emotion that comes out of that. And maybe that's what we need to tie into, is to understand that better. I don't mean to empathize with racism. I don't even mean to empathize with them in full, but we've got to try to figure out different ways to reach these people. And it's not through fact checking.
It's interesting that you say it, because I do think one of the best questions to ask a person, a voter, when it comes to politics is, what are you afraid of with this outcome? What are you afraid of with that outcome? And I think those of us who are terrified and mortified by Donald Trump and his supporters have a pretty articulate way and list that we can say. And I think a lot of times the Trump supporters will just say socialism.
It's a high level concept that doesn't mean anything, right? And what are you afraid of Obamacare? What really about that makes you so frightened? Death panels? Well, we got that going now.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's that level of abstraction that media doesn't get down to. And the reason they don't get down to it is they don't listen and they don't empathize at that level. Again, emphasize that it's other communities than white people we should be paying attention to first, to make sure that they can't be ignored the way they have been. And we don't empathize with horrible emotions like racism, but we do try to understand circumstances.
I think if we are able to connect with it in the media, people who are part of the most vulnerable categories of human beings in our country and in our society, and if we can find the people that are good at articulating what they're afraid of and what they're dealing with, then you can share that amongst a wider population as a media outlet. And because the most vulnerable folks are the tip of the spear, and they're going to suffer anything from climate change to economic and health and educational issues long before the rest of us will. So if we can get ahead of it, if we can share their stories and make them be all of our stories, the way the Black Lives Matter movement has law enforcement's abuse of black bodies, that makes a difference. It does make a difference when we allow them, when we help them tell their stories.
Yeah, and it may be a story we don't like. It may be a story we don't understand. There's a company I love called Spaceship Media that brings together these kinds of communities in conversation. Like back to Hannah Arendt, I think that what she said, the base of totalitarianism is alienation. Someone feels alienated from society, from themselves, and then there's a void that it's very easy for a Donald Trump or a Fox News to come along and fill in that void with emotions, with anger, with high-level concepts that don't really matter, but that make you feel good. And I think that's kind of where we are in this. And the problem is seeing people as a mass, as a mob, is also fundamentally an insult. It doesn't get us very far to see them as a monolith. We've got to start understanding them as individuals, members of communities.
I think the alienation also breeds a search for community, which is very natural. And a lot of people on the kind of angry white uneducated side find that in groups that like to hang out on the weekends and form militias and white supremacist groups. It's almost a natural consequence or natural order of things. And I'm sure, I don't know if Hannah Arendt writes about this, but there's been so much great, research into this. And now with the internet, it allows you to find your people so much easier. They don't have to be in the same location as you. And most of it, I think, is harmless when you to find your people. I've built a community here with this show, and it's been, I think, amazing for all of us. But a lot of times the thing that brings you together in this case can be racism and guns on the weekend.
Yeah, and you want to get under that. I mean, Wilhelm Reich and Erich Fromm had a Marxist and Freudian analysis of this. They believe it's sexual, and they're looking for a father or Führer figure.
I can see that.
And that you're repressed, and they thought there were sexual answers to that. I won't go quite that far. But there is something about being able to put on a uniform, even if that uniform is just a leather jacket and a gun, and feeling that you have a power that you otherwise felt powerless. And I think we got to figure out the psychology of that.
I think that illustrates the behavior where people, they get in these caravans and drive around with their Trump flags too. That also is part of it, I feel.
Yeah, I think it is, because they feel empowered. And to what end? What did it matter to shut off the Tappan Zee and the Garden State Parkway? It's just a way to piss off people and show that you can, which was the point. But there was no political end to it, except it made them feel good as a group. However, I don't think that's a real community. I think a real community is built around the needs of your everyday life and your actual interests and your actual care.
Sir.
And this is instead, as the theorists around mass theory would say, it is instead a group in which you get lost. You lose yourself in it. And your identity becomes that group, rather than saying, here is my identity, and I'm finding other people who are really like me, and I bring that to that group. Instead, you're looking for a group to give you an identity.
So well said. Fascinating. All right, Jeff, read all of his recent work. Follow him on Twitter right now. And I'm so glad that I was able to sneak some of your time in on the podcast today. Thank you, sir.
And I'm honored to be snuck in.
Love him. Love talking to Jeff Jarvis. There he goes. Thank you very much, Jeff Jarvis. Follow him right now at Jeff Jarvis. Read him at Buzz Machine. And he's one of my all-time favorites, as are all the guests on the show regularly. I guess that's why they're on, because they're my favorites, including our next guest, who I put a video clip out of yesterday. She is a political scientist, a PhD, now at Fordham University, where she specializes in American politics, black ethnic politics, urban politics, quantitative methods, and public opinion. She is the author of Black Ethnics, Race, Immigration, and the Pursuit of the American Dream. She tweets at Dr._CM Greer. You can hear her co-hosting a podcast with Dr. Jason Johnson on the Grio podcast network. You can read her at Aussie, where we start in this conversation talking about a new word that she taught me. Anagnorisis. Anagnorisis? Dr. Christina Greer will clear it up right now.
So I wrote this piece yesterday for Ozzy asking, is America going to have this moment of anagnorisis where we sort of wake up and realize what we have become? Like, oh my gosh, are we this nation of white nationalists who do not want to have unity, coalition building, and we are fine with all of the sort of ills that we reap domestically and internationally? Or are we going to have this moment where it's like, for the sake of the nation, for this country to survive and thrive, we have to change. Like, this is our moment in an instant. To make it a little more clear, it's the moment. You saw The Godfather, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, listen, listeners, if you haven't seen The Godfather, put it on mute for about a minute. But Sonny, hot-headed Sonny, right? And so the reason why I love The Godfather is because so many of the characters remind me of characters in Greek tragedies. I'm actually working on a book in my head comparing the Iliad and The Godfather. That's a whole nother project. But hot-headed Sonny, sort of like swift-footed Achilles in the Iliad, right? Hot-headed Sonny, you remember when their sister was being beaten by her husband and he, takes her in the bedroom with the belt. Yep. You can't see it, but you can hear it. It's worse. And he's like, take that, you guinea brat. Like, just, it's terrible, right? But then she calls her brother and it's like, he beat me. And hot-headed Sonny hops in the car, zooms over to her house, and he's at the toll booth. And he pays the toll and the lever doesn't go up. And it's that moment, that instant, that he realizes all the things that his father has told him about him being a hothead, about not listening, not being patient, about not understanding how to see the long game. He then realizes my brother-in-law beat my sister, knowing I would rush over here solo so that he could kill me.
Right.
And that's what ends up happening. He gets ambushed at the toll booth. And so that's his moment of agnoresis, where he sees everything in an instant. But, you know, the acting is so brilliant. You literally see the moment of his agnoresis. So I was wondering if America would have that moment. Clearly, we didn't.
Well, I mean,
we did. We did and we didn't, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We're now seeing, I think a lot of folks are like, oh, wow, Obama's the anomaly. Trump's not, right? This is who we are. This country is predicated on white supremacy, anti-Black racism, patriarchy, and capitalism. This is who we are, people. Like the brochure says Ritz-Carlton, but it's a hojo.
I feel like
when
you say this is who we are, I mean, like 3 million more Americans voted for Hillary Clinton. It'll probably turn out that many more million Americans voted for Joe Biden, but more people voted for Donald Trump after 4 years of absolute constant chaos every day than did before he was president. So, I mean, how do you... We're
looking at 250,000 people dead, and there are a lot of white Americans that are just fine with it. And I'm putting it on white America. Like, yeah, there are lots of Black and Latinx and Asian folks who voted for him too. But like, let's be clear. Like his base, the supporters, like the large percentages. I don't care that it went from 13% to 15% of Black men or whatever it may be. Those are whole numbers. They are nothing compared to white America is fine.
We don't know exactly what the breakdown was because it's based on exit polls, which isn't that accurate.
It's too soon. But we don't even know that. But like, let's just say even if Black men did increase, even if. But you know the demographics
of white America for sure, and you can see that they increased their vote in both is seemingly. I mean, it's got to be men and women, and it's.
Well, I mean, listen, white women uphold patriarchy. They always have. That's how the institution of slavery lasted 400 years, right? I mean, this is like the fundamental difference between us and Europe, because in Europe, you know, men went away to the colonies. They did their dirt. They had their second families. I'm the product of one from the Bahamas, right? So it's like two separate families. And they came back home, washed their hands, took a shower, and sat like civilized people, right? In America, you couldn't do that. It's a family enterprise. You had to teach your wife how to train a slave. An enslaved African, I don't use the word slave. Slave is like a noun. Enslaved African makes it a relationship between two people. Okay. One person is being enslaved and the other person is doing the enslaving of a human being. But you also had to teach your children at a very young age. It's like this person's property. So like you play together, but at the end of the day, you own them. So they can do whatever you want them to do. They must do whatever you want them to do. This is why I'm obsessed with Mark Twain, because he captures this moment in American history so beautifully. Oh, shout out to the Mark Twain House. I'm part of their virtual gala on Friday.
Oh, cool.
Oh, very free. Cool. It's free if you want to join the virtual gala. It's like
share
Jimmy
me a
Buffett,
link.
Like John Grisham. Like it's a whole bunch of us who just love literature and Mark Twain.
Definitely send me a link for that and I'll share it. But I mean, how do you think that where is that now today with, you know, white women and patriarchy and white men and racism and xenophobia? I mean, I do, because I want to see positive change. And I think we have seen a racial awakening amongst a lot of white people during the pandemic, over the protests, the Black Lives Matter movement. I feel like we've seen progress, but is it, how do I articulate it? Is it just, we've seen a little progress, we've seen a little bit, but it's got to go way more.
That's the way it's always been in this country. We ebb and we flow, right? The Civil War ended in 1865. We had Black folks in Congress during Reconstruction. Right. And then we hit up Jim Crow and it's like lynchings and all that is rolled back. I mean, this is the long hustle, right? This is the long journey. This is what our ancestors told us about. This is what my grandparents tell you about. It's like, you know, and young people want things now and fast. It's like, no, that's just not how this country has ever worked. And so this is why, you know, I tweeted this morning, I was like, patience is a virtue. Like when we think about what virtues are.
I love that tweet. I love all your tweets. I hang on your tweets. I seriously
Maybe I should tweet more, I guess.
I mean, you couldn't tweet enough from me, but I woke up to a nice tweet from you, and let me see which one it was.
On Twitter, I try not to like have vitriol. There's a lot of vitriol on Twitter, so it's like if I'm going to say something, it's like everybody chill out. You know, like this is first of all. I mean, when you wake up and when you tweet, and just like that, the sun still rose and birds still saying patience is a virtue. That's what you tweeted this morning. It was just pitch perfect. I love that tweet. I was like, just like that.
I was like, if Dr. Greer is saying that, then.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. This is what I do. The first thing I do when I wake up is I say thank you.
Gratefulness.
I mean, that's just like, because my grandmother said, you know, I'm obsessed with my grandmother, my late grandmother. Lillian McRae. She's so wonderful. But, you know, she was just like, I just don't understand those people who like wake up in the morning and they just don't say thank you. Like, I just don't know. She just like baffled her, right? This is someone who grew up in the segregated South, had some of ninth grade education, right? And it's just like, and then 2 granddaughters, one's, you know, double Ivy MD and the other one's an Ivy PhD. And she's just like, I just don't get it. Like, she's just so brilliant.
Yeah, but you could, the assumption that the kind of elephant in the room assumption is whether it's you or your grandmother, it's so easy, especially for me as a white man, to be like, well, you have so much to be upset about. You have so much to be scared about. You have so much to be concerned about. How can you find what I'll call that kind of grace?
Right. Well, here's the thing. I mean, first of all, and I'm just going to keep it real. It's like, no white man is going to kill my spirit. I own that.
Bring in Mike. Come on in, Mike.
Right. So it's like, it's not possible. It can't happen. It won't happen.
In this case,
it's impossible.
Trump or any other.
Anybody.
You're not going to
No one can. No. And so like when I feel that happening, when I get overwhelmed, especially when I was in grad school and, you know, you're broke and you're tired and like the abuse, like the intellectual, mental, emotional abuse of grad school is like, I'm only 20% processed. And I was on a panel a few weeks ago with this very powerful Latina who's a dean. I won't say the school, but she's at a very prominent school. And I just flippantly said like, yeah, I processed like 20% of grad school. And she like privately texted me and was like, 20%? You've processed 20%? Like, oh my God, I think I've only processed 5. And I was like, wow, like the trauma that we went through to say, and I thought it was like racial until like talking to my therapist and realizing like there was some sexual harassment that I just ignored just to survive. But anywho, I say all that to say, when I feel myself getting like, oh gosh, like my spirit's getting weak and I feel like other people are affecting how I view the world, how I view myself, then I do like a 30-day or a 2-week gratitude journal, which is I wake up and I have to list 15 things that I'm thankful for. And it's like, if you can't list 15 things that you're thankful for every morning and they have to be different every day, then it's like you have a real problem with your perspective. I mean,
but that sounds hard.
When you wake up and you have a crick in your neck, the next morning you will wake up and it's like, I'm thankful that I can move my neck left and right. Like, I'm thankful that, you know, if you have a splinter that you can't get out, it's like, I'm thankful that like my digits all can like touch things freely. I mean, or like how you smell something, right? Like people who got COVID, who lost their sense of smell. It's like not having a sense of smell is a really dangerous sense to lose, right? You don't know if your house is burning.
I was thinking that, yeah.
You know, like I have some hearing issues from a car accident when I was in high school. And my right ear is weaker than my left. That's why I'm like also a loud talker and I live in cities. But it's like, you know, I am very appreciative of the sense of sound. That's why I think like I'm getting into birding because it's like, I hope this isn't the case, but like, I don't know if I'm going to lose my hearing at some point in time. Like, I don't know if like the sounds that I hear, ambient or otherwise, will one day disappear.
I mean, so you're being thankful for your senses in this case. I wish you would.
Well, or the world. Like, it's like, I'm thankful that I get to be on Pete's podcast and we get to talk and I feel like they're good white people in the world. Like, whatever it may be, like, it could be nature, it could be your family, it could be your personal health, it could be your friends, right? It's like, I'm thankful that, like, I have a best friend from 9th grade who calls me and, like, she does not say hello. She just starts talking as though we've been on the phone already for 2 hours. And it's like, she's done that since we were 13. I'm very thankful for that. That
is such a great lesson, and I'm so glad that you shared it. Well, how do you think that the media overall handled this? You're a political science professor, and while you appear on media, I feel like you're always best long form, having a thoughtful conversation about things and not falling into a lot of the traps that we fall into, especially on, say, cable TV or on social media. How do you think the media handled this campaign and election night? And talking about patience usually doesn't work.
No, I mean, here's the thing. I don't think the media understands race or racism. And I've been saying that since day one. Like, they didn't understand it when this man came down his brass escalator and said Mexicans are rapists, right? So it's like, y'all don't get it. Like, we've been ringing the alarm for 4 years. It's like, this is what this man's going to try and do for re-election. Yeah. Like, the second he was sworn in, it's like, this is what he's going to do to stay in office. Right. Like, as my grandmother used to say, if you lie, you cheat. If you cheat, you steal. If you steal, you lie. If you do one, you do all three. Right? I mean, like, that was the worst It's like, if you tell a white lie, she's like, oh, so you're a thief now, huh?
I love her. I love her.
What? It's like, I mean, my mom's the same way. Like, literally, she was like, my curfew's 12, I get home at 1. It's like, where were you? It's like, oh, I was at, so-and-so's house. And, I'm hanging out with Pete, but I was supposed to be hanging out with, Sally. And she's
Thief.
like, oh, so you've lied now. And I was like, well, I mean, and you're a teenager, so you get caught in lies. You've got teenagers.
Yeah.
Constant. So you'll see it. If you haven't seen it yet, you'll see it.
I saw it 7 minutes ago.
Right. And so my mom would always be like, oh, so you're a thief. And I'm like, what? And she's like, listen, if you lie, you cheat. If you cheat, you steal. If you steal, you lie. And she's like, they're all the same. If you do one, you do all three. And the thing is, I mean, I am a firm believer of that. Like, if one person does one, then ultimately they'll do.
Well, let me just ask you one more big question here, which is, I think, about...
I'm all over the place because I'm also on 2 hours of sleep.
That's totally fine.
This podcast is like Chrissy's music.
Just to be in conversation with you is an honor. So what about religion is what I want to ask, because so many self-identified Christians are also Trump supporters, and that crosses, and we could get into talking about Hispanic, Latino voters as well. But what are your thoughts on the people who consider themselves to be religious or evangelical, or especially Christian, because we're talking about the American electorate, who also vote for a beast, a cruel, horrible beast of a man?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you 2 answers. One is Dr. Greer. I'm going to give you another one is Chrissy.
Oh, cool. Which one comes first?
So Dr. Greer is going to say, well, some of those voters are single issue voters. And because Donald Trump has provided them with, 3 Supreme Court justices who will vote against choice, they call it pro-life, but it's a governmental issue. So it's pro-choice or anti-choice. He has delivered over 200 judges across the country in lower level courts who will, uphold conservative ideologies that are in line with sort of church ideology. That is part of the reason why they've chosen to support Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence, who also tends to be more of an evangelical Christian. And that movement is highly lobbied and funded, and they're incredibly powerful in electoral politics. That's what I would say about the religious right.
What does Chrissy say?
Chrissy's like, these racists hanging on to a man who's thrice married with porn stars, lied, cheat, steal, talks about Mexicans, immigrants, Muslims, Black folks. He's the antithesis of a religious man, right? What he does to people, how he talks to people, who he is the opposite of any sort of Christian ideological belief that you have to have. So you are clearly hanging whatever it is you want to tell yourself about your God. You are a goddamn racist. That's what it is. So go to church, pray to your white Jesus, and take those tax breaks. That's what you're doing. And no, I'm not your judge or your jury, but you'll meet your maker at some point in time, and you're going to have to explain why it is that you chose to cast your lot with a man as abusive and divisive and antithetical to everything that is in your scripture. That's on you, not me.
Well, I like Chrissy better than Dr. Greer in the last moment, at least the answer. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for all that. I'll be continuing to talk with you, and I think our conversations have been so enlightening for so many people. I think that's what we really have to do is keep talking to people who know a lot more than so many of the people that we've grown to, quote, trust and accustom to thinking are smart. Well,
you also have to guard your peace. This is a long road, and I think a lot of people just want it to be wrapped up, and it's like, well, that's, most people don't have the luxury.
I've heard you use that phrase a lot. I think it's time you start a workshop.
I got a lot of
guarding your peace with Dr. Christina Greer.
That's from my colleague Kalila Brown Dean, who's a professor of political science. Yeah, here's the thing. I have a whole bunch of stuff in my toolbox, right? Because the thing is, people ask me this all the time, and it's like, it is very difficult as a Black person to survive in this country, as we have seen. Literally just to survive, right? Because you can get murdered just like walking down the street, being in your bed, being at church, at the playground, like from the police or a vigilante. So to thrive in this country, and I'm not saying that the people who aren't thriving, it's any fault of their own, but to thrive is like a very thin needle that you thread on a daily basis, because you have to know white people and you have to know the capacity of white people. there are a lot of good white people. I mean, this is how like black people have actually survived in this country for so long. Mm-hmm. There are some really horrible ones as well. And there's some really horrible black people, as we have seen this election cycle, who uphold anti-black racism just as strongly as the most white racists. That obviously had to exist as well. This is why Mark Twain is so brilliant, because he talks about them too. But to sort of survive and thrive, and not just in an economic sense, but in like a spiritual and intellectual and like emotional sense, you have to like be on your P's and Q's and like think about these things. And so like there's certain things where it's like, I got to deflect. Like sometimes I have to be an ostrich, and it's like, I'm not dealing with that. Like I'm not going to put that on me. So like all of my, I call them chicken littles right now, the people who are like, the sky is falling. So like my white friends who are like, what is happening? Yeah. What should I be doing? And it's like, you know what? That's not my job right now, because we've been friends for 25 years. So like, no, we're not doing this. Like, that's the little piece of me that is like, and I'll circle back. But like, come on, if you haven't picked up the tools in 25 years of our friendship, then we're not doing it this week, at least.
Thank you very much for all that. And thank you for your time.
It's like, get this crazy woman out of here and get her a nap. I adore talking to you.
All right, Dr. Christina Greer, everybody. Ain't she great? Love how those conversations seem to meander from the personal to the professional in terms of how she deals with things in life and copes, and also how she looks at everything from literature to politics to history to gender and obviously race, which we talked about. Always fun, Dr. Christina Greer. Tell her you heard her here on the show, and follow her on Twitter at Dr_CM Greer. All right, finally, I caught up with Christian Finnegan, who I did not get to talk to last week. He usually joins me on Friday episodes, but he will be on the Thursday episode, right? Because there are no rules. Who knows? And we had a great conversation. Loved talking to him. Took a look at of course, as we did with everybody else on the show, a little analysis of the election and where we go from here. On Twitter, at Christ Finnegan, one of my favorite comedians and cultural commentators. Such a smart guy. Always makes sense of things that I can't find the words for. Here's our latest conversation. Christian Finnegan joins me now. Where were you last night? How are you watching the returns?
My wife and I were all by ourselves at QED, her currently dormant performance venue in Queens, and we were just watching. We were watching on laptops. We had another thing streaming, mirroring on the television. I was looking at my phone, typical 2020 type shit. It was a grind, man. It was a grind.
You and I are talking at 7 o'clock on Wednesday night. The election still is not been called, but people are talking about it right now, at least on Twitter and on TV, as if Joe Biden has won, which I don't love, but that's how people are talking about it. So that's kind of where we're at, in case so people are listening, knowing what time it is when we talked. But when did you go to bed? Like, did you just call it quits at some point? I mean, that was a weird decision last night for me.
I mean, I did and I didn't. I think we finally crawled into bed around 2:45, 3, and then I woke up at 5:15 and just was looking at my phone for 45 minutes. Then I'd be in a semi-dream state, and then I'd pick up my phone again at 6:30 and then 7:50, just that until finally when we crawled out of bed.
Did you pick it up dramatically fast like I did? Like if it was in a TV show or movie? I really did. I was like, oh. Like I quickly went to it and like scrambled through to try to get to the 100%, news.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I was constantly refreshing the 538 updates, which, I don't know if anybody other than the House, Senate, so the House and the Democratic House and Democratic Senate, I don't know if anybody took it harder than Nate Silver last night. He doesn't really come out of this looking great, some of which is unfair, some of which is not. But it is kind of like, all right, so wait, why are we listening to you again?
So, well, it's not just Nate Silver, right? It's polling in general. Yeah. And I don't really have a good read on how the polling was conducted and whether or not it performed good or bad, except for, obviously there's a lot of examples, certainly in the Senate races, especially where it's so obvious in a case like Susan Collins, where she was losing by anywhere from 5 to 8 points, and she ended up winning by like 10 or something. Like what happens there?
You know, I mean, in Nate Silver's defense, as people on Twitter have pointed out, he is not a pollster. You know, he's an aggregator and a data analyst, you know, that he's taking the polls that are released other places and trying to analyze them and create models. He's a modeler, not a model.
No, he is not. I'm just saying that he's not. I don't know what you're saying, but he's definitely not a model. But I mean, obviously everything was totally askew. I mean, I definitely on a lot of those Senate, you know, because I would go to 538 5 times a day. I'd also go to Real Clear Politics 5 times a day, and I could see a lot of those Senate races tightening. But man, oh man, I still thought we would. I thought we would. When I say we, I am acting like, you know, I'm being tribal and saying we. I thought the Democrats would still get 51. I thought they would hit 51. I didn't think they'd get any higher than that, but I thought North Carolina was going to eke it out. I thought she'd eke it out in Maine. I knew Iowa was kind of a lost cause by Election Day, but it's depressing. If there wasn't that one big thing to be happy about, it would be pretty ugly today. Have you read anything or heard anything that makes you concerned about any kind of corruption, hijinks, shenanigans of any sort, or any?
I don't know, man. I mean, the errors were too disparate and in too many different places, especially when you're looking at the House and Senate races. I mean, that's just across the board. I mean, the House lost seats. I mean, I know in 2018, Democrats ended up gaining seats a week, 10 days later, as, you know, votes were tallied and whatnot. So but it seems to me that Pelosi lost seats, which was a shock to me. I thought they would, you know, have a net gain of at least 2 or 3. So to me, there's way too many races where the Democrat underperformed to blame it on that. I mean, in terms of the presidential race, and of course, there's the USPS shenanigans and all that. But it tells me that we don't really know anything, that people aren't honest when they talk to pollsters, that pollsters may not be talking to a representative group of people. They might, you know, you're getting a poll of the people who respond to polls, not of people.
I think all that's really important, and I don't know exactly how we change it for the future. I guess I can't stop. All day I've been asking myself one question I can't come get the answer to, which is, if 2018 there was this pretty big blue wave, and you know, that's a midterm election, obviously more people are going to turn out for a presidential election. But what happened between 2018 and 2020 is the pandemic, and with the pandemic, the economy. So what changed? How did he and how did the House lose seats? How did Trump win more votes than he did 4 years ago? And how did he seemingly have some kind of momentum, certainly in a number of states, after a pandemic? And I think you had a tweet there about, or I think it was you, about the tribalism and nothing matters.
Yeah. I mean, Zach Beecham from Vox had tweeted something about how, you know, trying to make sense of this. And, you know, you would think that with COVID and all that, you know, but the fact is that his approval rating really didn't move a lot, you know, up a few points, down a few points. And it just sort of underscores the idea that maybe nothing really matters. You know, it's that people have a team and they're going to fight for that team. And, you know, the truth be damned. And I think there are a lot of people out there who, they don't think that Trump did a great job on COVID, but they don't believe that anyone else would have done better. They think that, you know, it's a pandemic. Shit happens. I'm trying to put myself in the head of somebody who could have lived through the last 8 months and say, yes, more of this, please.
I think not
clearly
enough
people did.
I think not enough people. I mean, this sounds so horrible, but not enough people from the kind of demographics or constituencies that matter got sick and died. You can always find these stories, and the media will certainly tell them a Trump supporter got COVID, or their loved one got COVID and died, and they still didn't change their mind, or they did change their mind, whatever. But those are just anecdotes, and they don't add up to a mass of people. And it was mostly, you know, the elderly, people of color, more vulnerable communities that are getting sick and dying. And then you throw in this kind of removal of freedom to move around, to go where you want to go, to live your life the way you want to live your life. Now you have to wear a mask. You have to do all these things. Like that fits into this whole paradigm that we've been hearing about liberty and freedom from right-wing talk radio for years. That's how they're looking at it. And it seems like the kind of the secret solution on COVID, on the pandemic. It's just why they didn't seem to care. It didn't affect them, and they feel like their liberty is being taken away, like the beer, barbecue, and freedom guy who I watched 30 times.
I watched that a bunch of times too. Yeah, I mean, as I was saying on Twitter,
go ahead.
I think that everything is so tribal, and that social media just hardens those battle lines, and that I think on a lizard brain level, for a lot of these people, they just don't want to admit they're wrong or that their side is wrong, and everything else be damned. They don't genuinely believe that one president is going to make this better or worse. So why should I humiliate myself in front of all of my high school friends who argue with me on Facebook by admitting that I backed the wrong horse, and by being humble about my political views and saying, okay, maybe I screwed up here? Why do all of that when this pandemic is just going to do what it does anyway? So fuck it. I mean, that's the only thing that I kind of keep coming back to, is that Trump's approval rating has never really changed. Kids in cages didn't do it. Charlottesville didn't do it. All these things didn't do it. And I think that there's a sort of a sunken cost fallacy. There's just, the people who support him, it's like they're in, and there is no way out other than admitting you're wrong, which is the one thing they will not ever be able to do.
There were a lot of theories that I think no longer really matter, but that a massive win, a thumping, would affect the ideology. It would affect the fever. The cult would maybe come to its senses. And who knows if that would have been true or not, but that it doesn't seemingly at least be this resounding victory that's going to change anybody. I mean, what do you think of that, and where do we go? Where are we now?
I mean, well, the only thing that kind of gives me a little comfort in when talking about something like this is that nobody really knows anything. Things change radically. I mean, think about how much changed the night Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. To me, that was really the turning point when things got fucked up for Democrats.
That's a great point.
And a lot of people thought, like, oh no, this is going to be really bad for Republicans. They're going to have to confirm a justice. No, I think for a lot of people, especially the kind of people who are inclined to vote Republican, the idea that they got away with it, it's like, we're going to do this and you can't stop us. It's like, yeah, they're winners. I want to be on that team. Yeah. That's my team.
Yeah.
You're the beta cuck simp bitches. We're the ones who tell you this is the way it is.
The way I feel right now. I definitely don't appreciate the way you pointed at me as if you were definitely talking about me. Well, the other thing,
Pete Dominic, are that.
I'm a beta cuck bitch.
Yes. Forgot simp. I threw simp in there as well.
Well, I think the other thing, just the other piece of criteria that is getting away with not paying taxes is cool.
Yeah, I mean,
like everybody tries to get around taxes one way or another, but the idea of not paying your taxes, like being a good thing, a patriotic thing, something that we would revere, usually the kind of thing it would sink a candidate, an affair, not paying taxes. But again, getting away with it along what you were just saying. I think that's what you're saying. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, and I think that for a lot of people, Trump became a symbol of a social order and a social hierarchy that had to be defended. I think that I've always had a theory that Republicans didn't go truly crazy until Obama got reelected. I think the first time, of course, that started the Tea Party and all that, which, of course, was racist in nature and honestly was the birth of Trumpism, really. I mean, that's people talk about it was about, taxes and finance. No, it wasn't. It's completely about race, and Obama and Trump took advantage of that. But when Obama got reelected, a lot of Republicans were like, oh, fuck this. Like, I thought everybody would just make a mistake. Probably a similar thing may have happened if Trump were to get reelected this time, where it's like, okay, no more Mr. Nice Guy. The difference is that we don't have a Trump on our side because we're not willing to sell our ideals down the river the way our Republicans are. The Republicans look at Trump as a fire hose that they can just aim at the people they don't like.
And I just want to only add, it's not just ideals, because it does water down to that for most people in politics. Their kind of ideology or their tribal mentality almost. It's almost like their masculinity. For people on the left, we're really talking about laws, regulations, policies, plans, things that make our lives better, healthier, richer in ways. And we think about those ideas and we argue about those policies. And I think one of the most fascinating kind of undercover ideas, Trump never had that. He never campaigned. He never had a platform. There was no platform.
No,
at the RNC. No. There are no plans.
That's what the term cult of personality, implies. But what he was offering was different than what Democrats offer in a very primal way. Democrats offer you policies and ideas that will change the course of your life over time and your children's lives. Trump offers you a blowjob. It feels good and it's immediate. It happens now. It's a cellular emotional feeling. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but what is he putting in your dick while he's doing it? Because he's poisoning you in a way. Like he's giving you this momentary release that you love. It's kind of like a emotional release. I'm going to continue with the metaphor, but really he's killing. He's literally killing. If you look at the speech, if you continue with the metaphor, his rallies, he's giving speech. People are getting sick there, but they're exactly what you're saying. They're getting that. They get to go to a rally. They get to feel the way he makes them feel. They get to watch him dance. But they might also be getting sick.
I mean, it's as close. It's funny that, K-pop fans have been such a online force against Trumpism. But those people in Trump rallies, they're K-pop fans. They are stans, truly. That it's not really about Trump. It's about us. It's like us as a group. We are Trump supporters, and that it's probably as close as you get when you get to a certain age to feel like you're part of a crowd and to be in a cool club and, it's community.
For sure. Yeah. And it comes with a uniform and a flag and a hat and a way of thinking. But it is. They don't have the ability, I think, and I don't mean to be, I'm not trying to be pejorative, but they don't have the ability to articulate what he represents in terms of real, actual effects on their life.
Because they can't say it out loud. Even if they know it, they can't articulate it. Because really the answer is, you've made me feel bad and I don't want to feel bad anymore. I'm in charge and you need to acknowledge that.
Yeah. Yep.
You need to acknowledge that, whether you're black or you're gay or you're, artsy or whatever. I'm sick of you trying to make me feel stupid. Fuck you. I'm in charge. And that's what Trump represents to them. Fuck you. I win. That's what it is.
You want to know,
I don't know that that's going away. And there's a lot of people saying now, like, oh boy, Trump did so well that, boy, any semi-competent version of Trump is really going to clean up in 2024 or whenever. I don't necessarily know that that's true because there's a secret sauce that Trump has that I just don't know that anyone else, no one else is going to be able to gather that sort of emotional energy.
I don't think anybody else can lie in the way that he can. In terms of just performatively and even in terms of their own conscience. You can think of like a Tom Cotton or a Ted Cruz or any of these guys that are pretty smart in a media appearance, at a speech, but they do actually, they have principles and ideas that they would have a hard time, I think, just lying about.
Well, Trump has a chip missing.
Right. Yeah. Better said.
Freedom that normal people don't have.
Better said.
We all have a sort of moral gag reflex that kicks in, that if we just lie blatantly in a way that is completely obvious and we get called on it, there's a part of us that instinctively feels shame, or we start stuttering, or we can't articulate our words all of a sudden, we start sweating, but Trump doesn't have that. Trump can literally say the sky is green and the grass is purple, and he believes it because he wants it to be true.
Right.
And
no one else will do that.
There's a power in that.
And no one else will do. I mean, maybe like a Tucker Carlson, like a TV personality turned. It's only like, I think maybe that's the only thing we're missing is some kind of actual performer turned politician, which is what Trump is.
Tucker, obviously Tucker Carlson is a guy and he gets a lot of support as a cheerleader for Trump. But Tucker Carlson at the top of that bill as the guy, I'm sorry, Mr. Gorton's fish,
Swanson,
air.
Swanson Foods.
Swanson Foods.
No, the Gordon fish, they're good people. The Swansons.
The Swansons.
White supremacists.
I mean, the guy who used to go on CNN with the stupid bow tie and be the sort of try to be the.
Well, I mean. No, you're right. It would be hard to.
Leroy of the right. I mean, it's just not. It's not going to take. I don't think. I mean, I could be wrong. He has a massively popular show. Yeah. I just don't think that connects with people on a cellular level the way that Trump does. That's like, this idiot sounds like my friends, and he hates the people I hate. I just don't know that. I don't know that Tucker Carlson or anyone has that it factor.
Can we spend
describing it as that?
That's funny. Can we spend the next hour talking about if only it was Bernie and rehash the primaries? I mean, a lot of people saying Bernie predicted this, and there's a quote going around. I'm not sure exactly. I haven't watched it, but this I haven't seen as much of that. I haven't seen as much of if it was Bernie.
It'll come. It'll come.
Because I think the point that you made earlier, that Zach Beecham made, and that you're addressing about the nothing matters. I look at it and I say it would have been much easier to paint Bernie Sanders as a socialist. It was far more difficult, as I think people predicted, to paint Joe Biden as an extremist.
Well, I mean, it doesn't matter if you don't actually believe it. Then it doesn't. You can say it very freely.
That's true.
The whole game plan of the right for the past 10 years since Obama took office is just a relentless application of bad faith, and they don't need to believe what they're saying. People have this idea that you have certain beliefs and that dictates the things that you do. And I have always thought that it's the inverse, that people believe what they want to believe in order to do the things that they want to do. Those things that their lizard brain is telling them to do, they will create a belief system that covers that intellectually. And these people, it's like, they don't care. It's like, I was talking about the Tea Party earlier. It's like, they didn't give a shit. All those people with the stupid tri-corner hats, they don't give a crap about the Boston Tea Party. But they will adopt that framework because they know that is a socially acceptable sort of political ethos to cover up the actual inspiration for it, the helium that makes that balloon rise, which is racial panic, racial and demographic panic.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, so well said. Very well executed. Christian Finnegan and seen, really. Well, I feel like we should just end, and I don't want to talk with anybody about what's about to happen with the Republican Senate. Forget about that.
It's going to be brutal.
It's going to be brutal, but like the lame duck, the next, 2.5 months, really? Yeah. Trump's still in charge. Like, there's a lot that we can speculate about what's going to happen, but I think nobody knows, and it's probably not the best exercise.
Well, as if there wasn't enough to sort of want to roll your eyes at. If they do go through with this Wisconsin recount, and even Scott Walker, former governor, says,
Sean Duffy, 2 Wisconsin Republican politicians, and you can't do that. It won't matter, right?
It's not going to matter. Yeah, I think they did a recount for the last midterm election. I think they garnered 131 votes.
Right.
So, but if they do go through with it, the results of that recount won't even be announced until December. And so, I think we're just going to have to kind of live in this sort of Schrodinger's cat sort of reality where it's Biden won, but he hasn't officially won for a while.
I feel like all the
electoral blue balls.
That's what we had for the last 48 hours, too, in a way, just holding our breath. But I feel like there's going to be all the networks are going to call it. And all of the newspapers and all the news outlets are all going to call it. All the states are going to call it. And there's only going to be Trump and his sons and right wing media that are going to be creating.
And I think that McConnell, having cleaned up. I mean, I will say McConnell, in many ways, this is McConnell's dream. Like, he no longer has to account for Trump.
You're the second person
for Trump
to say that.
He already got his 3 justices.
Yep.
And so it's like, I could totally see him just being like, sorry, Trump, you're on your own with this, because what does he have to gain by another 4 years of Trump, really? It's not like Mitch McConnell wants to do anything politically. He just wants to stop things from happening.
Right.
All he wants to do is just, get judges on the bench. I mean, that's it. As far as I can tell, that's all he wants to do.
And mission accomplished for him. So, yeah, he can just sit back now and be like, no.
Yeah.
No.
Mm-hmm.
We will see. But great analysis. And I'm so glad that you're available to chat with me. I really missed you last week. Thank you for doing this.
Well, thanks, Pete. I appreciate it. I needed somebody to spit my invective out that's not one of my dogs.
Always a pleasure, buddy.
Thanks, dude.
All right, that is all I've got for you, and I think that was a lot, huh? Dr. Jason Johnson, Jeff Jarvis, Dr. Christina Greer, and, of course, Christian Finnegan just now. Thank you very much for listening. This show is supported by you. It is independent media. It's advertising free because you are paying me to do the show every day, and I couldn't do it without you. If you haven't signed up for a subscription, I would love to have you. We'd love to have you as part of our community, which is growing every day. Go to patreon.com/Pete Dominick or the paid subscription link in the show notes. You can be part of our Discord platform where you are never alone. There's always someone there to chat with. So I hope that you will become a part of our growing community. I love you. I'll talk to you tomorrow.